Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a second look at the Tyro 89. You may have noticed I took down my original video because I couldn't make it fly, and that was my own fault. But let's get started on the specs. Comes with 1204 6000 kV motors. Comes with two full sets of these odd gym fan-like props. 20 amp 4-in-1 ESC with these connectors on it. F4 flight controller with an OSD. I still don't have it mounted right. Caddx EOS 2 FPV camera. 25 milliwatt VTX. It does come with a capacitor. The canopy's hard molten plastic of some sort. Comes with the typical cheapo depot battery strap. I ended up with 2 zip ties left in the kit. It does come with a right angle USB adapter. After you're done assembling, you will end up with some extra parts, which is good. It weighs 75.5 grams. I flew it on these two 3S batteries. The RDQ label says 525. The GNB says 520. Oddly enough, RDQ batteries are made by GNB. With the GNB battery, it weighs just over 118 grams. And with the RDQ battery, it weighs slightly less. Go figure. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting just a touch over 114 millimeters. Bottom plate is 3 millimeters thick. As you see in this little capture of Betaflight, I'm able to get away with flying this without properly mounting the flight controller because I have the board and sensor alignment set at 45 degrees on the yaw axis. Before we get started here on the flight, I do have to warn you that there is a glitch in my DVR. Unfortunately, since this flight, we've gotten all sorts of weather, and flying outside just isn't possible right now. We've had all sorts of snow. We're having some melt off right now, which makes it even harder to fly outside because if I land in the snow, it's likely to be wet. So we've gone back to some older footage here, and I did tune it to a little bit of a degree. You'll find that we do have some chop in the tune, so I'm not going to post my tune because I don't think it's probably the best tune that's out there. I think you should probably look elsewhere for the tune. You might actually recognize that plant sitting out in the yard because I have other videos previously from 2+ weeks ago where that plant was also in the yard. So those are things I have to disclose. So this kit comes in at $89, but right now Banggood says it's on a Christmas sale. I suspect $89 is going to be the price after Christmas is over as well. So what they've done is they've kind of gone to that nth degree on the toothpick sort of category. They've got some 1204 motors. They're a little bit higher kV than they probably need to be. These props are fairly unique. I don't know where they come from. I don't know if there's an actual issue with them or they're better than other props by chance, but I wanted to go ahead and fly them with these props, and if I had more time, I would have tested them with different props as well. I probably would have gone to my favorite gym fan props, the 2540s. So those are some things that I just haven't had time to do because the weather has been so bad. I've been locked inside. Matter of fact, before the Christmas here, you won't see any other flight footage that's outside just because the weather outside is not good. And I'm running out of time. With a family, I got a lot of presents to wrap. That's my part of the job. My wife does the shopping, and I wrap the presents. But it flies fairly well. You know, I goofed. I made a mistake, and you'll have your opportunity here in just a moment to let me have it. But as far as this machine goes, yeah, it flies pretty decent, but it's not going to be a top performer. And I think for $89, no one expects it to be a top performer. And it's a little bit on the heavy side, which may mean it's kind of robust. You know, carbon quality and durability is something that I can't necessarily judge unless I break it, because if I don't break it, then we don't really know. I apologize that the audio is out of sync on this. Again, I just haven't had as much time as I would like to have spent flying it as I normally do. We've got a number of different glitches within this flight footage. I could remove the audio and then you wouldn't have that to enjoy, I guess, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it in there because I think the audio is important when it comes to listening to the tune and how the machine sounds, especially if you're out park flying. That sound is what others might hear and take notice of, and that's an important decision factor for many people. But we end the flight. We come in at 2 minutes and 47 seconds, which isn't terrible for something coming in at this weight. We could have flown a little bit longer because their ending battery voltage per cell comes in over 3.6, so maybe another 10-15 seconds possibly. Okay, so here it is. Yeah, I was a fool. I didn't do it right. You guys were right. Many of you commented about I didn't have the flight controller mounted right, and here's your opportunity. Get down there in the comment section and type away and let me know. Keep it clean. I can take it. I make mistakes. Go ahead. Hopefully you've had enough time where you pause the video to type the comment about the mistake I made. So I wanted to come back and revisit this because you guys were right. As I said, I didn't have it mounted right. And actually, I was sitting in a meeting and I was flipping through my photos and I noticed a picture of the flight controller that I'd taken before I'd assembled the kit. And I noticed that it had an arrow on it and it was pointed essentially 45 degrees. And I was like, that's odd. I also noticed the chip. The chip was mounted like I hadn't seen before. And that's what clued me in. So that night, when I had an opportunity, after taking the kids to all their different things, I came down, I sat down, and I started playing with the Betaflight configuration. I hadn't taken it apart yet to see that the canopy actually had those holes. As you can see from this picture, it definitely has holes for mounting the flight controller. It's a unique thing. It's something I had not run into before. I don't think I've ever seen a build mount in the or the flight controller mount in the canopy, but it's there. That's the design decision that they made. But I started playing with Betaflight, and that's how I got mine flying. So you can mount yours as they intended through the canopy, or you can offset the board and sensor alignment 45 degrees, and then you can go fly it and do a traditional stack. I think this does present another opportunity. I think I kind of misrepresent sometimes about builds on the channel. There was some discussion on the old video about how I don't build and that I'm a newbie building. That's just not the case, at least in my opinion. I've been doing this YouTube thing, I think getting close to 4 years, or right around 4 years. If you want, you can go back and check when I first started posting. And I do commission builds from Adam from time to time, because a lot of things start to come out, especially in the summertime. You know, you get a lot of different quads coming out, a lot of different frames, and I want to explore those things. But whenever I build, then I don't have time to record, and then I don't have time to check the comments, and then I don't have time to edit and post. So it does slow things down. I think in total, I've probably commissioned 6 builds from Adam, and I've probably had 1 or maybe 2 other builds that were done by the frame designers and then sent to me. But for the most part, most of the quads that you see up here, they're builds. I've built many quads. It's rare that I take the components off of one quad and just put it on another frame. Usually what I'll do is I'll buy new components. That's one of the things I use the channel money for, is that I'll buy components and then I'll put it on the frame itself. That way I have different experience with parts, and maybe there's a new flight controller that came out and I want to use it, or I've already used it and I want to use more than one, so I get a better sample. Some new motors. Motors are oftentimes a thing. I've got 2 now boxes of motors. I need to start giving motors away as well. Of motors that I like to try, because they're a huge factor in how things perform. The motors are really, really important, and we match motors to props, and weight and all those things kind of come together to create what we might like or dislike. So the short story is I've probably done somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 builds. That's just speculation, but I do think I misrepresent that a little bit on the channel when I do talk about the fact that Adam commissions builds for me, so I wanted to mention that. Let's get back to the quad at hand, and let's talk about a few of the features or things that I did that I thought were needed to be done in the build process. So because I didn't mount my flight controller up in the canopy, you can see that that allowed me to mount my receiver up top, and then I actually used a little zip tie right down through here in order to kind of control the antennas, and then I routed them out over here. That's how I do it. You could do it any old which way you want. You could route them up through these holes if you want to. Maybe you can zip tie between the holes and have the typical ears. There are holes on both sides for that. You can mount them out of these holes if you choose to. I think that's a hole. Oh, no, that's just a secondary spot for the camera so you can sink it back further. And yes, that was the camera angle I was flying it at, which is pretty much the maximum. I think you could get it up maybe another degree or 2 before you start to see some of the canopy in your view. But so the flight footage that you saw was at the max camera angle. And then, as I talked about in the last video, I used one of the zip tie ends that I snipped off, and I stuffed it underneath the VTX and added a little bit of heat shrink to give the antenna a little bit of rigidity so it wouldn't flop into the props, because that does have some potential, because as you can see, that little antenna wire is really, really small. I also added a zip tie, of course, for our battery lead right down here, and as you can see, I created a little loop or wrinkle or excess right in here before I hunkered that down, and it does seem like the carbon is made for that purpose. At least we have this little slight T shape right out here to hook our zip tie on, so that shouldn't come out. It should be quite sturdy. I used some of that cheap knockoff Grip, the URUAV battery pad stuff, which does work pretty well, but I'm certain it doesn't work as well as Grip. I did use the thicker stuff. I also have some of the thinner Grip that's blue, but with these screws down here, I didn't think that was thick enough in order to keep my battery up off of there, which I don't want my batteries getting damaged, because I reuse those time and time and time again. I thought the length of the motor wires was a little bit odd, being, you know, this is all a pre-configured kit. They should have, they don't need to be tight, but I just thought there was as much as 3 or 4, maybe 5 millimeter of excess wire that we just don't need between the motors. Of course, they don't need to be taut between there, like I said, but I just thought that was a little bit odd that they weren't cut a little bit cleaner. But you can, of course, wrap those in any old tape that you like to dress it how you want. Also, I thought the build was a little bit particular in that, according to the pictures, and many of you have made build videos for this, that you kind of rest the ESC on the carbon. As you can see possibly down through there, there's nothing supporting the ESC. But again, that ESC shouldn't be supporting anything, because if you build it properly, then you have the flight controller up in the canopy. So you have this just be dead air, and then that's probably where you'd want to mount your antenna. I don't know if, and maybe some of you can correct me that have seen, I have watched Dumb Thumbs and Peppy Prawns, the quadcopter review. They both have build videos on this, and if you need any help building those, I'll have links down below to their videos so that you can watch those. I'm not certain that if you build this with the flight controller up in the canopy, that right angle adapter is going to do you any good. I could be wrong there, but as you can see, I don't have mine. Let me zoom in. I don't have mine mounted up in the canopy, and you can see how close it is to the canopy already. And if you're trying to get that right angle adapter in there, of course it would probably be, let's see, it'd be more over this way where this gap is. So that gap may be intentionally cut out there so that you can use the right angle adapter. I'm just not certain that's going to work. But again, if you have seen those other videos, I missed that part. I watched 2 different build videos after I found my mistake, and I didn't see that part. I just could have looked away at the time that was discussed. I'm not saying it's not there. I just didn't see it myself. I do think the canopy is a good choice because it's real. It feels like it would take a pretty good beating. Of course, if you fail safe from hundreds of feet up in the air, I don't expect it to live if it comes down on cement or something super hard like cement. It does feel like it's a kind of material that would take at least some level of abuse. It wouldn't break really easily if you're out trying to learn. The kit is primarily solderless except for your receiver, and if you have a receiver with a connector on it, maybe you don't even have to solder at all. But that's the one place that you will probably need to solder. Also, there is a solder pad. There is a solder pad on the flight controller to where you select between PPM, which we really don't use anymore, and S-Bus, which we traditionally use all the time. I kind of wish the flight controller would just not come with that, but I get it on those inexpensive flight controllers. That's often something that we have to do. So those are the 2 different things you may have to solder. So if you're looking at this kit as plug and play, pretty close, but not quite. For $89, I thought it was a reasonable performer. I thought the kit was relatively easy to put together. If you note the things that Dumb Thumbs FPV and the quadcopter review did in their build videos, which are linked on the Banggood webpage now, that if you build it the way they build it, you'll build it properly and you won't have the issue I had. So what do you think? Is it worth $89? Is it only worth $79? Is it worth $109? What do you think of this kit? What did you think of the flight time? What did you think of the flight performance? And if you haven't, you probably need to go ahead and leave any sort of terse words you might have for me about my initial mistake. I did take that video down shortly after I discovered my mistake, trying to be as responsible as I can. But there's a balance in that responsibility, in that if I have troubles and I don't post it, then that also skews your ability to go out to YouTube or other places you look at quadcopter reviews and make a decision about whether the kit's of quality and if it's something for you. So there's a balance in that responsibility, good and bad. And in this particular case, I made the mistake, but I thought I was still responsible to post that I had troubles with it. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.